Okay, so hi, I'm Ellie, and I research the identity development between monoracial and biracial teens. Historically, identity development um, has been, historically, the majority of the population around the world has been dominantly monoracial, but now that is quickly changing. I am half white and half Asian, and the question of my identity felt a little different to me than how it felt to my monoracial peers. Growing up in a monoracial world, I found that it was hard for me to find where I fit into the common monoracial categories when I really only partially fit into multiple categories. The 2020 and 2010 censuses show that in just 10 years, the number of biracial individuals that identified as biracial increased by 24.8 million, meaning that much of the current population of biracial individuals in the US are young teens, and this topic is becoming increasingly more important. I found that there really isn't much research on this topic, especially for white and Asian individuals. So how do biracial and monoracial teens identify? Racial identity is a term used to describe how individuals categorize their race or ethnicity, although racial identity is how individuals categorize themselves. There's a lot of other factors that affect how they identify themselves. For biracial teens, one big factor is environment. If an Asian and white individual is surrounded by mostly monoracial white individuals, they're most likely to mold into what their surroundings are and identify more as white. Another big factor is if an individual is surrounded by racism or oppression. This can affect how they really want to identify with a more dominant race, and this can cause internal oppression and low self-esteem, leading them to identify more to assimilate. So physical characteristics are also a big factor. So how you look, your eye color, your face shape, they all affect what kind of race you look. And most observers usually commonly put people into monoracial categories by just looking at them. So let's say if someone would look more Asian, they're going to be put into the monoracial box of Asian. And this also will lean them more towards identifying more as Asian. Another big factor is an individual's family. So how their parents identify is going to usually affect how they identify and their relationship with their racial identity. And if they're around more of a certain culture with family surroundings, they will most likely identify more with that culture. And for monoracial white adolescents, they usually find their racial identity just with their parents. So however their parents identify, they identify. But many monoracial white teens and just individuals right now are living in a colorblind era. So they were raised with racial colorblindness, although this is usually not intentional. It's just a lack of awareness about race. And a lot of white individuals have been found to not really think of themselves as having a race. So the lack of racial socialization just changes the way they identify with their race. So between the two, biracial individuals do experience a lot of internalized oppression, and their process of identification is a little bit more complicated. And usually monoracial white individuals do have also a bit of a different process just because it is not quite as a big topic for race. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ellie. We did receive in some questions. So two of the reasons that you gave or that you have for conducting research on biracial and monoracial individuals? Sorry. Was that one, there was more of a biracial, and there are more biracial individuals now than there were 10 years ago. And second, there isn't much research on the topic. What other reasons would there be to conduct more research on biracial individuals' experiences?
I think some more like reasons are just because their experience is pretty different. And you know, there's more people now, but yeah, just because they're the having different races and trying to find your identity with those two different push and pulls is kind of a good reason to research.
Totally. And the second question is, what responsibility, if any, do parents have to discuss race with their children?
I think parents have a really big responsibility to discuss race, just so their kids are informed, because, you know, being less informed usually is the cause of a lot of problems, and just informing your kids about race is actually helping instead of just kind of avoiding the topic.
And then the question I've been asking you all, every one of you, what advice would you give to another student just starting research on this topic?
I think I would say just to start, like, don't think about it too much, just start reading, start researching, and then figure out what you want to look into.